Welcome to Skeleton Key Productions. I'm Crown Grace Cocon. Let's get into the video. Today's video we're going to be doing our very first film review, and it's none other than Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. So we mentioned this in like the last videos when we were doing the biography of Walt Disney, so definitely check that video out, and also watch the video slightly before that, which was the kind of film reviews intro. That will basically explain what we're going to be doing moving forward with the rest of this channel. So buckle up and yeah, don't forget obviously to hit the like button if you haven't already, and subscribe again, yeah, if you haven't done so. Join the gang, we've got plenty more videos in store, and it will be really great if you come along for the journey with us, right? So what we're going to do with this video is we're going to structure it in this particular way. So we've got 6 different parts to the video. So part 1 is the story of the story, part 2 is the story of the creator, part 3 is the story of the studio, part 4 is the themes and history, part 5 is the legacy, and part 6 is the notable lines and effects that we have in the films, right? So buckle up, and without further ado, let's just dive straight into the analysis for this video. So Snow White is a very, very old story. It goes back to at least the 18th century, although there are some versions of it that go back much further. And you know, the first time it was ever kind of written down into a kind of like proper like story was with the Grimm brothers. Yes, this is in 1812, and it was I'm terrible at pronouncing German, so forgive me. It's the Schneewittchen. So yes, that's Snow White, right? So basically, the plot for the book and the plot for the film are very much aligned. There's not too much kind of variation with that. So what we're going to do now is kind of run through the plot real quick for those who haven't seen. Spoiler alert, don't care. It's been out for almost 100 years. Even if it came out yesterday, I'll still spoil it because I love spoiling films and stuff, right? Because I think that spoiling films, it gives you like, I know what to look for, right? If someone spoils a film for me, I know what to look for, right? I don't have to like figure out loads of things, right? Well, it's quite obvious anyway. But anyway, so the plot of it is basically you got Snow White. She's a princess, and as always, there's the evil stepmother. Evil stepmother is the queen and stuff, and she's really jealous. She's really vain. She looks all day in like a magic mirror, yeah. And the magic mirror, you know, she talks to it and goes, "Who's the fairest of them all?" And the mirror says, "It ain't you, love." Right? It's Snow White. So she gets really jealous and decides that she's gonna make a hit on Snow White, right? So she gets a huntsman, and you know, says, right, take her into the woods and then like, you know, hack her out and like kind of like get her heart and like bring it to me, right? However, he didn't have the heart to take her heart, right? And so this huntsman just lets her like run off into the woods, and yeah, she's all scared and blah blah blah. But it turns out that what she was scared of was basically just a bunch of critters, and so they kind of like take her to a house where she can spend the night. And when she gets to the house, it's all really dirty. Like she's like, "Oh my god, this house needs cleaning. It's never been touched. Like, kind of what the hell?" And looking about, she's like, "Everything's really small. Maybe it's just a bunch of like little kids that live here, right?" That would kind of explain everything. And maybe that, you know, maybe they don't have a mother. Maybe that's why the house is in such a mess, right? However, later that night, the dwarfs come back. So it's actually the house of the 7 dwarfs, and yeah, they come back and they're like, "Why is the house looking so clean?" They go upstairs and they're like, "Who's this in our bed?" And yeah, turns out it's Snow White. And they go, "Oh wow, she's really beautiful. Let's let her stay," right? So while this is going on, back at the castle, you know, the queen goes to the mirror again and says, "Who's the fairest of them all?" And the mirror says again, "It ain't you, love. Snow White's still alive." So this mirror, he needs to get broken, yeah, like kind of like, you know, like in terms of 7 years of bad luck, doesn't matter about that, yeah, because he snitches, right? He says big things.
What the hell is this? A snitchathon? Man, there's snitches everywhere.
He says, first of all, the huntsman didn't do his job properly. You've got a pig's heart in your hands. Like, it's not Snow White's heart. And then second of all, he says, "Yo, she's living still, and she's living at the Snow White's house, right?" So he just snitched major things, yeah, right? Like, he, you know, like, so the queen at this point is like, right, okay, I'm gonna do it myself then. So she goes down into the dungeon and she has a bunch of different potions, and one of the potions she has is to change her into a witch. Yeah, it's all very scary. And then she ends up having another potion, right? And this is to turn an apple into a poison apple. Now, I don't know why she didn't just use arsenic, yeah, but instead she decided to do some mad potion, and this is called the Sleeping Death. Now, a Sleeping Death has a get out clause, which is that if the person is kissed by their true love, yeah, like the first time, whatever, then it breaks the spell and she comes back to life. Now, I don't know why you'd have this get out clause, but whatever, anyway. So the witch then goes to the dwarf's house where Snow White is, while like the dwarf's off at work. And the witch is very clever, yeah, because she plays off of her Snow White's like hopes and desires, right? So I should have said that at the very beginning. Basically, Snow White, there's like a Prince Charming. He does some really simpy things where like he sings to her and stuff. And, you know, we probably would have had a restraining order if this was done in real life. But anyway, it's a cartoons, right? So Snow White throughout the film is like hoping and praying that like her Prince Charming will come and save her, you know, the kind of jazz.
Women.
So the witch says that this is a wishing apple, right? If you take one bite from this, then all your wishes will come true. So Snow White takes a bite from the apple, and while this is going on, the animals go and get the dwarfs, yeah, and you know the dwarfs come back, and then they decide to chase the witch up the mountain. This is obviously to get vengeance for killing Snow White. The witch goes up the mountain, tries to kill them by like getting a bolt to crush them, but then you know it kind of backfires, and she ends up getting hit by a lightning bolt, and then like she falls down the cliff. So that's the end of the witch, right? However, Snow White seems to be dead. But she's so beautiful that they decide that they're not going to bury her. They're going to basically do like a Lenin, right? So basically she's going to be in this coffin, in this glass coffin, and basically everyone's going to be able to like look at her and like pay respect to her. So word gets out to this Prince Charming that Snow White is dead. So he comes and pays his respects, and when he goes there, you know, he gives her a kiss. At which point she comes back to life, and then you know everyone all lives happily ever after because she goes and she kisses all the dwarfs and stuff. Then she goes off into the sunset with her Prince Charming and blah blah blah. Okay, so it's a nice little story, right? So that's the story of the story. Now we're going to talk about the story of the creator. Now Walt Disney had a massive part in this film, yeah, probably more so than any of the other films that were to come out at a later point, because obviously he produced them, but for this was really his kind of like idea, yeah, because like we said in the previous video, no one had ever tried to do a feature-length animated film before, yeah, not like this. So this was really revolutionary stuff, yeah. Like, so before this they just done like little like short clips of like different cartoons and stuff. So Disney pitched the idea to his staff, and he acted out the entire film, right? Well, obviously, like this, like before, it had certain tweaks and stuff. But yeah, so he acted out the entire film to his staff and sold the idea to them. This is in 1934. The film took 3 years to make, but yeah, so in 1934 he did this. Now, there's a main writer called Richard Creedon, and in total they end up having 8 writers for this film, which, you know, is not uncommon within like Hollywood and stuff to have multiple different script writers for things, right? And most of the meetings that they had was to do with the different so-called gags and screwiness, yeah, right? So this is all the different like jokes that are within this, because what you tend to find, especially with a lot of like comedy writing, you tend to have lots of different writers, yes, so then they can kind of bounce ideas off of each other, right? So most of the film is just taken up with different screen time where it's dealing with this. If there's any noise, by the way, we are having the roof done in my house, so if you hear gunshots or whatever from the sounds of it, that's what it is, right? Apologies for that. So the names of the 7 dwarfs, yeah, were decided out of a pool of 50 names. And actually some of the names, which end up being picked later, did not end up being what the 7 dwarfs were called. So the 7 dwarfs, you got Doc, you got Grumpy, you got Bashful, you got Sleepy, and you got Happy, right? So these are like 5 names that they managed to pick. And then there was going to be 6 and 7, right? So the 6th one was going to be called Jumpy, right? And the 7th was going to be called the 7th. And this person was meant to be deaf and lively, as they describe it. Now, the thing with Walt Disney is that he decided that each of the dwarfs was going to have their own character, and they're going to have their own names. Because in the original story, there's like a main dwarf, and then all the rest of them are just called the other 6 dwarfs, right? They don't have any personalities. So what he wanted was for each character to have their own personality and to have a name that reflected that. And so that's why they have all these kind of like goofy names, right? So it's quite interesting to note, yeah, that Sneezy and Dopey, yeah, arguably some of the like best known characters, especially Dopey, yeah. You know, my granddad used to call me Dopey for obvious reasons. still probably does, and again, obvious reasons. But yeah, so that's why we look at like the story of the creator, because it's always quite interesting to see the creative process that goes into the kind of character development. Because whenever you're looking at any kind of like book or any kind of like film, etc., these characters aren't real, they've been created, yeah, and so someone's had to think them up and think what are they like, right? And I say this as a script writer myself, like kind of this is some of the process that you kind of like look into. And then also as well, actually, the final thing I'll say with regard to the creator side of the thing is that the Queen was originally going to be fat and batty, right? So if you look at quite a lot of Disney villains, so some of them are just scary and evil, and some of them are kind of just like a bit dopey and a bit kind of like, you know, they're just idiots, right? And what they wanted with Snow White was they decided that the Queen needed to be more statesmanly or like more stateswomanly, you know, so she had to be a more intimidating character, yeah, and therefore they decided against her being fat and batty, because they thought that when she transformed into a witch it wouldn't be as scary. And I think that they were quite right to make that decision. I think it would have been, it's a lot more believable making the transition from one to the other than from like fat and batty to the other, right? So yeah, so that kind of covers the story of the creator. So now we're going to be talking about the story of the studio. So as we said before in the last video, you know, the animation was a very, very long process. That's part of the reason why it took up to 3 years to make this film. And, you know, the animation in those days, each frame had to be drawn by hand. And it was a very kind of long and laborious process. But, you know, the artwork, considering how long it took, they really didn't like kind of like cut corners. In a lot of the later Disney films you see, there's not much like kind of depth. But with this, you know, each frame is like a piece of art. Yeah, they really kind of have thought about it. And also as well, something to note is that Snow White is the only Disney film that the Disney Corporation still to this day does not have the rights to. So the reason for that is because at a much later point, you know, Disney had their own music publishing company within the corporation, but up until that point they had to use different companies. Yeah, so I can't remember the exact company name for this one, but I have it on screen now. So in subsequent films, they were able to kind of like buy up the rights to the films that have been made already. However, this company here refused to sell it to Disney, and so yeah, so Disney does not have the rights to you know, Whistle While You Work, to Hi Ho, to any of the songs that were in that, right? So all the music, all the songs, they don't own anything still, right? And then also as well, something to note is that Adriana Caselotti, I think that's how you pronounce her last name. So this is the voice of Snow White. Now, as would happen in a lot of films in those days, in particular a lot of animated films, people wouldn't get credited for their role. And so even though she's the voice of Snow White, you expect that to be obviously like, you know, to have quite like high status and for her career to be able to take off. She at the time only got paid $970, right? And when you adjust that for inflation, that's just $18,000. Now, obviously, you could kind of say, okay, well, Disney Corporation at the time wasn't that big and yada yada, and that's a kind of a fair point to make. However, because she was uncredited, it meant that she then struggled to get jobs in the acting business throughout the rest of her life. So I think one of the last films she was in was It's a Wonderful Life, and even for that, she's not credited. She's like one of the singers in one of the bar scenes that they have there. So it's really tragic that like someone who was in, you know, starred in such a high like grossing film, as we'll talk about in a little bit, the fact that she struggled with the rest of her career kind of shows you how the you know, the entertainment industry, especially in those days, yeah, and even still to an extent these days, right, is still a really cutthroat business, right? So I just want you to kind of understand that the art that people put into things isn't always rewarded as it should be. Right, now we're talking about the themes and the history, right? So obviously this is the 1930s where this film's coming out. It's the, you know, the Great Depression. People are like really depressed and stuff, obviously. You know, World War II hasn't really started yet, but kind of, you know, people are very worried about like this kind of looming war. And so they want a kind of like escapism at this moment in time. And so they want kind of very kind of standard kind of stories. They want kind of like romantic love. That's a major theme of it, obviously. And kind of thing of like triumphing over evil, also as well like kind of people the witch obviously is exploiting a good-natured person and stuff, and so it's one of those kind of like life lessons for like stranger danger, like don't just trust people on the face of it. Also as well, obviously it being the 1930s, there's very traditional gender roles, right? So Snow White comes in, she cooks and cleans for the men go off to work, and she didn't have a job other than that, so all she's left to do is sit and wait for Prince Charming. So it's not like let's become an accountant or let's like do something else. Instead it's like, let's just wait for Prince Charming to come and save me. So obviously there's kind of like romantic love that they kind of like were focused on those days, and the kind of traditional gender roles, right? But also, like with most films, there ends up being influence from other films that come out at the same time. So Disney really encouraged his writers to go and watch a bunch of different films that were coming out, both American films and like kind of international films. So for instance, so like we said, the film comes out in 1937. In 1936, the writers go and watch Romeo and Juliet. So obviously this is the Shakespeare story, but this had been made into a film in 1936. And watching that, especially with this with the kind of like a glass coffin that they have in that film, really influenced the writers for Snow White. So that's why she ends up being in a glass coffin. Also as well, the transformation of the Queen going into the witch, that was influenced by Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. So obviously that's a classic story from the 19th century. However, this had been turned into a film in 1931. So again, this really like heavily influenced the people, right? And also as well, there was a lot of German expressionist films which came out in the 1920s. So obviously this is Weimar Germany. This is before the no-no Germans come in, and don't want to get demonetized, whatever YouTube's weird like that. But anyway, so in those days with Weimar Germany, people were a lot more expressive, and like they kind of were dealing with a lot of like dark kind of like issues and stuff, because obviously it was just after World War One. So a lot of the kind of like really scary scenes were in that, like the kind of the witches scenes, and then also like running through the forest and stuff at the beginning. A lot of the artwork in that is heavily influenced by the expressionists at the time, so the German expressionists. So so that was some of the influences that went into Snow White, and you can kind of see that when you're watching it. Now in terms of the legacy of the film, right, so first of all we have to say that the budget for this, it went way over budget. So before this, they'd made silly symphonies, and like these were like little short cartoons. And so the average cost of one of these was $25,000. So they was like, okay, right, let's just scale it up by a factor of 10, and that's probably what it's going to be. So it's probably going to cost us $250,000 to do this. $1.5 million later, so that it's gone over budget by a factor of 6. Yeah, that's when they finally end up doing the, that's when they finally made it, right? So greatly kind of underestimated the cost of the film, but it didn't matter because it was the highest grossing film of all time, right? At that time. And it held that position all the way up until 1939, when Gone with the Wind took that position. And even to this day, like we said in the last video, when you adjust for inflation, it is still the highest grossing animated film of all time, without question. Like the nearest thing is like Lion King, the 2019 remake, and even that was only like 1.6 billion, right? So yeah, Snow White made big bucks. So it didn't really matter that it went over budget, because it all worked out in the end. And also as well, something I really want people to understand is, like we said in the last video, I don't want you to just watch these films, or like watch the videos about these films and look at it from a 21st century viewpoint. I want you to put yourself in the viewpoint of someone watching it in 1937. When you do that, you understand just how phenomenal this film was. It's just magical. There's no other words to describe it. Because 9 years before this, you had Steamboat Willie, right? Steamboat Willie, this was cutting edge animation, right? And then you compare it to Snow White, it's like chalk and cheese, isn't it? That's how revolutionary this period was in like the movie industry. Before that, you had silent films, everything was in black and white. Within the space of about 10 years, you had speakeasies, right? I think that's what they were called. I can't remember now. I think they're called speakies. But and you had like color film, right? So this was a revolutionary period, but no one had ever seen a cartoon like this go on for this long with this much in-depth like kind of storyline, the songs, the audio, just everything. Yeah, it was a revolutionary thing. And when you look at it through the eyes of someone in 1937, you can understand why Walt Disney and many other people in the audience for that premiere were in tears, because it's just so magical. And I can't stress that enough. If you haven't seen the film for a long time, watch it, right? Because all these kind of Disney films, it's called family entertainment for a reason, because everyone in the family can watch it. It's not just like Teletubbies or something that only little kids can enjoy. No, even if as an adult, yeah, you watch it and you will understand bits in it that you would never have understood as a child. So I highly recommend that you watch this film and stuff, right? But now we're going to be talking about the notable lines and the special effects. So one of the major effects that they had in this film, which were really revolutionary, was multi-plane cameras, right? So this gives the film a kind of like 3D angle to it. So especially in the kind of like forest scenes, and also like when it's rotating and like the queen is transforming into the witch. These techniques were really like kind of like cutting edge for the time, and so it gives the whole film a very 3D feel. So before this, obviously cartoons just looked very kind of like 2D, and you're very aware you're watching a cartoon. Whereas when you watch a lot of Disney films, yeah, from Snow White onwards, it gives you a 3D feel, and so you kind of end up being very much more invested in the story, yeah, than you otherwise would be, right? And some of the notable lines, obviously you've got like some of the great songs in it. Hi Ho, Whistle While You Work.
Whistle while you work, Hitler is at work. He's half army, so's his army. Whistle while you...
And also as well, yeah, we got some other lines there like.
It's not for you.
And then on top of that, yeah, you have this great line from Doc, which is.
What you doing here?
Yeah. What are you and who are you doing? What are you? Who are you, my dear?
You know, I don't know why, but I found that really, really funny. Yeah, so I thought I'd just kind of include that. So anyway, so that brings us to the end of our first film review. So that's Snow White. The next film we're going to be doing is Pinocchio, right? So definitely stay tuned for that. We're going to be going through it in this same kind of way. And again, sorry if there's any noise, if there's any kind of disturbance and stuff. Having work done in your house when you're trying to film is not the best, but anyway. But yeah, so don't forget, obviously, hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and yeah, hope you really enjoyed this video. And in the meantime, have a great day and bye.